Yesterday we have discussed about local memory architecture, where in that we have discussed about all the components of local memory like work memory, temporary buffers, auto vacuum work memory, and maintenance work memory. Right. So with that, we have completed the entire Postgres memory based architecture. Okay. So today's topic is process based architecture. Today's topic is process based architecture. Okay, today's topic is process based architecture. So in this, okay, depending upon the type of process, okay, depending upon the type of process, we have divided the process based architecture into two types. One is mandatory background processes. Okay, depending upon the type of process, we have divided the processes into two. Okay, one is mandatory background process. Mandatory background processes. Second one is optional background processes. Optional background process. Okay, one is a mandatory background process and second one is a optional background processes. Okay. Okay, so mandatory background process means these are mandatory. Okay, these are mandatory to run the postgres cluster, and optional means depending upon our settings. Okay, if we enable it, the process will comes into picture. If we disable it, the process will be gone. Okay, so but whereas in case of mandatory process, these are mandatory. Okay, these are mandatory to run the postgres cluster. What are the mandatory background process that we have? We have background writer. Most of the things about this process are already covered in the memory based architecture as well. Okay, second one is a val writer. Third one is check pointer. Okay, these are the mandatory background process that we have in Postgres, whereas in case of optional background process, we have archiver, stats collector, auto vacuum launcher. Fourth one is logger. Fourth one is logger. These are the mandatory background process we have in Postgres. Now we'll discuss one by one. Okay. So coming to the background writer. Okay. While discussing about the shade buffers, we already had a discussion about the BG writer. Okay. Background writer. What background writer will do? Background writer writes data from shared buffer to background writer writes data from shared buffer to disk. Okay, in the event of when commit or checkpoint or one third of the shared buffer is filled. Okay, in these all these three events, background writer is a process which is responsible for writing data from shared buffer to the disk. What does it mean? What kind of data it is going to write? It is going to write dirty data. Okay, it is going to write dirty data from shared buffer to the disk. This is about the background writer. Okay, background, most of the time background writer will be in sleeping state. Okay, whenever it wakes up, okay, whenever it wakes up, it will go and check does shared buffer contains any dirty data, or if it finds any dirty data, then it will pick up those data and it will try to write the data back into the disk. When I say disk, it is a persistent storage. Okay, now coming to the val writer. Okay, val writer, what val writer will do? Val writer is responsible for writing Val writer is responsible for writing val data. Val writer is responsible for writing val data from val buffer to where it will write val files. Okay, val buffer to the val files. Okay, val writer is a process which is responsible for writing val data from val buffer to the val files. And when I say val files, what is the location of these val files? These will be stored under pg underscore val directory. pg underscore val directory is available under the data directory of the postgres. Okay, data directory of the postgres. What does it mean by data directory? That we will be seeing during the installation class. Okay, so val writer is a process which is responsible for writing the val data from val buffer to the val files, which are val files. The location of the val files is pg underscore val, and the default location of the pg underscore val directory is a data directory of the postgres system. Okay, now the third mandatory background process that we have in postgres is check pointer. Okay, the third one is check pointer. What check pointer will do whenever there is a checkpoint? So check pointer signals. Okay, check pointer sends a signals to checkpoint signals the val writer. Checkpoint signals the val writer to write val data from where to where? Write val data from val buffer to disk. Okay, whenever checkpoint happens, what will happen? Val buffer to disk. Okay, so val it signals the val writer to write val data from val buffer to the disk. Once it is done, it signals. Okay, it sends a signals to bg writer. It sends a signals to bg writer to write what data? It sends a signals to bg writer to write dirty corresponding dirty data. Okay, corresponding dirty data from where to where? Corresponding dirty data from shared buffer to disk. Okay, corresponding dirty data from shared buffer to the disk. This is how checkpointer works. Okay, whenever there is a checkpoint happens, it sends signals to val writer to write val data from val buffer to the disk. Okay, val buffer to disk. Whereas, and once that is done, it sends a signals to bg writer to write the corresponding dirty data from shared buffer to the disk. Okay, this is about the mandatory background processes that we have in postgres. What about the optional background process? Okay, what about the optional background process that we have in postgres? The first optional background process that we are going to talk about is a stats collector. Okay, stats collector is a process. Okay, stats collector is a process which is responsible for gathering the statistics like how many number of times table has been accessed. Okay, how many times table has been accessed, how many number of times the table has been accessed, and how many number of times index has been used. Okay, how many number of times index has been, how many number of times the index has been used, and how many number of times function has been called. Okay, how many number of times the function has been called. These type of statistics will be collected by the stats collector, and the usage of are and the usage of the stats collector is depending upon a couple of parameter. Okay, so if you want to enable the stats collector, you need to enable a parameter called track underscore count. Track underscore count, the value where track underscore count should be on. Okay, if the track underscore count is equal to on, then the stats collector will be active and it is going to gather the statistics in the database. What are the other parameters that are going to influence the stats collector? We have couple of parameters like track underscore functions. Okay, track underscore function, if we enable it, what it will do? Track underscore function, if we enable it, what it will do? It is going to gather the it is going to tracking the usage of the functions. Okay, it is going to track the usage of the functions. When I say usage of the functions, it is going to track like how many number of times particular function has been executed, or how many number of times the particular function has been called. That type of information will be gathered by stats collector when we enable the track underscore function parameter. And one more parameter is called track underscore, one more parameter is called track underscore activity. So when you enable this parameter, okay, when you enable this parameter, what happens, right? It is going to monitor the queries that are being run against the database. When I say monitoring the queries, let's say you are a client and you connected to the database and you are trying to run some queries. Okay, that information will be gathered by the track underscore activity function. Okay, that information will be gathered by the track underscore activity function. Okay, so as a DBA, if someone asks you to, okay, if someone asks you to check what are the queries that are being run against the database, then what you will do, just you will log into the database and you will check. How you will check? There is a table called pg underscore stat underscore activity. Okay, there is a table called pg underscore stat underscore activity. So who is populating the data into the pg underscore stat underscore activity? Stats collector is a process which is going to populate the data into pg underscore stat underscore activity table when we enable the track underscore activity parameter. How to enable this parameter, that we will be discussing it in the okay, parameters, concepts of parameter file management. Okay, then so track underscore activity is a parameter which is used to track, okay, which is used to track the queries that are being run against the database. Okay, queries that are being run against the database. Okay, this is about the stats collector. Now what is the next process? The next process we have is logger. Okay, the next process that we have in postgres is a logger process. Logger. Okay, what logger is going to do? This is also a logger, this is also a optional background process, and by default it is off. Okay, by default it is off. Okay, what it will do, right? Logger is a process which is responsible for logging the server messages. Okay, it is responsible for logging. Okay, it is responsible for logging the server messages. When I say, what does it mean by server message? Okay, depending upon the type of settings, it is going to gather the information about what are the things that are being, what are things that are happening in the postgres server. Which means, let's say you connected to the database and you enable the logging underscore connection parameter, your connection will be logged into the file. Okay, or when you disconnect also, that will be logged into the file. When you fire some query depending upon a type of logging parameters, okay, your query will be written. What is the query? The query will be written to this log file. Okay, and when you start up or when you shut down, the messages emitted by the server will be written into the log file. Okay, what is the location of this log file? By default, whenever you enable the log file, whenever you enable the logging, okay, so pg underscore log, which is available under the data directory. Okay, which is available under the data directory. In this location the logging file will be, in this location the logging file will be created. Okay, in this location the logging file will be created. Okay, so where do we use this log file? Okay, this is a readable file which, so whenever something goes wrong with the postgres server, as a dba we should jump in and we should check what is happening on the server, right? So the primary source for troubleshooting the postgres server information is, sorry, the primary source for like investigating the postgres cluster postgres cluster health or postgres cluster status is using the log file. Okay, using the log file. That is the reason why we always enable the logger process. How to enable the logger? So we, if you want to enable the logger process, there is a parameter called logging underscore, there is a parameter called logging underscore collector. Logging underscore collector is a parameter. By default it is on. If you make it on, by default it is off. If you make it on, the postgres log files will be created in the designated directory. So can we change, so by default where it is going to create a log file? Under the data directory. Okay, under the data directory there is a location, there is a folder called pg underscore val. Under this log file will be created. Can we change this? Can we change the location? Yes, we can change the location using a parameter called log underscore directory. Okay, using a parameter called log underscore directory. How to change and all those things we will be seeing it. Okay, so log underscore directory, and you need to give the new location. When you give the new location, what happens? When you give the new location, the log files will be created in the log underscore directory location. And one more thing is, there are a couple of parameters. Okay, so one more parameter is log underscore rotation. log underscore rotation underscore size. What this parameter talks about? So when you enable the logging collector, this parameter talks about what is the maximum size of the log file. What is the maximum size of the log file? Maximum size of the log file. Okay, let's say this log underscore rotation underscore size, we kept it to 1 GB. Once a log file is having a 1 GB of size, a new log file will be created. And there is one more parameter called log underscore rotation underscore age. Log underscore rotation underscore age. This talks about what would be the maximum age of this log file. Okay, what would be the maximum age of this log file? Once it, suppose when you kept 1 day, once it reaches the whatever the log file that we have, that will be deleted. Okay, so these are the couple of parameters which are available for like managing the logger process in the postgres. Okay, for managing the logging process in the postgres. What about the next parameter? The next parameter that we have is auto vacuum launcher. Okay, auto vacuum launcher. The next parameter we have is auto vacuum launcher. What is the responsibility of the auto vacuum launcher? Auto vacuum launcher is responsible for creating or spanning the auto vacuum workers. Auto vacuum workers, what is the default value? By default it is on. Okay, auto vacuum launcher is responsible for performing auto vacuum and auto analyze operations by creating the auto vacuum worker process. How many number of auto vacuum worker process will be created? It is depending upon a parameter called auto vacuum underscore max underscore workers. Okay, auto vacuum work auto vacuum launcher is a master process or a supervisor process which is responsible for creating the auto vacuum worker processes. Okay, and yesterday we have so when this auto vacuum and auto analyze operations will be triggered onto the disk, yesterday we have discussed about a parameter, we have discussed about a formula, right? What is like auto vacuum threshold and auto vacuum analyze threshold. Depending upon those parameters, auto vacuum launcher is responsible for launching auto vacuum workers to perform auto vacuum and auto analyze operations. Okay, that's, as I said, like most of the information about these processes are already covered in the memory based architecture. The last background process that we have, that we need to discuss in the postgres process based architecture is what? Archiver. So now by default it is off or disabled. Now we will discuss about archiver. Okay, so when I say val writer, val writer is a process which is responsible for writing this val data from where to where? Val data from val buffer to disk. When I say disk, it is going to write it into the pg hyphen underscore val location, right? So let's say my data directory location is /u02 postgres data pg underscore val. So the val writer is going to write these val files here. Okay, let's say what happens, right? So there is a excessive log generation and val files are getting accumulated here. Okay, which means, so let's say I have a u02 mount point size is of 10 GB. If the val files are getting accumulated, then what will happen? This 10 GB will be exhausted, right? So but what happens in postgres is like, whenever we are trying to write the val files, the oldest val file will be removed by the system itself. The oldest val file will be removed by the system itself. Okay, the oldest val file will be removed by the system itself. Okay, let's say I have a replication that is configured. Okay, I have a replication that is configured for the high availability. Okay, so this is a master server and this is a slave. Okay, how the replication will work? Okay, replication will work based on the val files. Okay, based on the val files, right? So in my case, what happens is after some amount of time, the replication breaks between master and slave due to network outage. Okay, due to some network glitch, what happened? The replication was broke down due to network glitch. So but as I said, like this val files will be overwritten by the postgres system, right? Once the network is restored back, the slave might need a val file which is already removed by the master. Understand carefully. So I mean, like, so once the network is back, and if and the connectivity is restored between master and slave, the slave might be looking for a val file which is already removed by the master process. In that case, what happens? In that case, replication breaks. In that case, replication breaks, right? So replication breaks and we need to rebuild the entire slave again. Okay, to avoid that, to avoid such conditions, what happens, right? Postgres has introduced a concept of archiving. Postgres has introduced a concept of archiving. Okay, archiving is a process of copying val files. Archiving is a process of copying val files from pg underscore val location to pg underscore val location to one of the archiving destinations. Pg underscore val location to one of the archiving destination. Okay, copying val files. Archiving is a process of copying val files from pg underscore val location to one of the archiving location. Okay, so when you enable the archive mode, it okay, we no need to bother about the val files that are being overwritten in the pg underscore val location, because the same file we will be copying it into some archiving destination, right? So what is the process that is responsible for doing that? Archiver. Okay, archiver is a process which is responsible for performing this archiving operations. How to enable this archiving? And how to enable by default, as I said, like by default it is disabled. How to enable? If you want to enable the archive mode in postgres, you need to set two parameters called archive underscore mode and archive underscore command. You need to enable these two parameters. You need to enable these two parameters to enable the archiving in postgres. How to enable these parameters and how to work on this, we will be seeing it in a concept of archive log mode. Okay, there is a separate class for archive mode, setting up archive mode in postgres. In that we will be discussing about how to set up the archive mode, and what does it mean by archive command, what is the values that we need to pass to the archive command, that we will be seeing it in depth during the archive mode, setting up the archive mode class. Okay, so if I want to set up the archive mode now, I should have a postgres installation done. But as we are not yet done with the postgres installation, we will be discussing this as a separate topic later. Okay, and so what happens that whenever you enable the archive mode, so if you remember when we were discussing about the val buffer. Okay, so val writer is a process which writes val data from val buffer to the val files in the pg underscore val location. All right, so when you enable, okay, when you enable the archive log mode, what happens, right? So upon writing the val data from val buffer to the pg underscore val location. Okay, so log writer, what val writer will do? Val writer makes the file name as makes the file val file name as file name dot ready. File name dot ready. Okay, file name dot ready, the val file name will be like file name dot ready. Okay, so as archive mode is enabled, archive process goes to pg underscore val location. It checks do we have any files, and it checks do we have any files with the file name dot ready status. Do we have any files with the file name dot ready status? Okay, if it finds any files with file name dot ready status, then archiver copies, okay, archiver copies those files from pg underscore val location to the archiving destination. Pg underscore val location to the archiving destination. When it finds a file with file name ready, that means file is ready to be archived. File is ready to be archived. Okay, so so what archiver thinks when it finds a file with file name ready, that means this file is ready to be archived, so it will copy this file to archiving destination. And upon copy file name dot ready is renamed to upon copy file name dot ready is renamed to file name dot done. File name dot ready is renamed to file name dot done, which means the file is already archived. The only point that we need to remember is if the file contains the status as file name dot ready, which means the file is ready to be archived, then archiver picks up, okay, then the archiver picks up that file and it copies that file from file from a pg underscore val location to the archiving destination. Upon copy the file is renamed to file name dot done. Okay, the file name dot ready means file is ready to be archived. File name dot done means already file is archived. So this is about the archiver process in Postgres. Okay, with this we have completed the entire Postgres architecture. Okay, entire Postgres